You should let him die." The words came from behind Alara, sharp and cold as the winter wind that howled outside the stone walls of the dungeon. She did not turn around. Her hands remained steady as she pressed a clean cloth against the masked prisoner's wounded side, feeling the warmth of his blood seep through the fabric. "He is the enemy," the voice continued, and Alara recognized it now as belonging to Marcus, one of the pack warriors who had brought this prisoner in 3 days ago. "He killed our brothers. He deserves to rot in this cell." Alara finally looked up, meeting Marcus's eyes with a calmness she had learned to wear like armor over the years. "I am a healer," she said quietly. "I do not choose who lives or dies based on which side of a border they were born on." Marcus sneered, but he left without another word, and Alara returned her attention to the man chained to the wall before her. He had not made a sound during their exchange, had not flinched when she touched. His wounds had not begged for mercy or hurled threats as other prisoners did. He simply watched her through the eye holes of that strange metal mask that covered the upper half of his face, leaving only his mouth and jaw visible. Strong jaw, defined. A small scar cut through his lower lip on the right side. She had been tending to him for 3 days now, ever since the warriors dragged him in barely conscious, his body broken and bleeding from what must have been a brutal fight. The alpha of her pack, Darius Blackwood, had ordered him kept alive for questioning, though what information they hoped to extract from a soldier, Alara could not fathom. But orders were orders, and as the pack's lowest-ranking healer, the Omega no one else wanted to acknowledge, she had been assigned the task of keeping the prisoner breathing. No one else wanted to waste their time on enemy filth, as they called him. No one else wanted to descend into these cold, damp cells that smelled of mold and despair. So, the job fell to Alara, as the worst jobs always did. Not that she minded. In truth, she preferred it down here. Preferred the silence and solitude to the constant reminders upstairs of just how little she mattered to her own pack. Down here, there were no pitying glances or casual cruelties. Down here, there was just her, and this mysterious prisoner, who watched her with eyes that seemed to see too much. She had tried to identify their color in the dim torchlight, but the shadows and the mask made it impossible. Dark, she thought. Deep and dark and fathomless. She finished cleaning the wound on his side and reached for the jar of healing salve she had prepared that morning. The scent of calendula and comfrey filled the small space as she opened it. "This will hurt," she warned, as she always did before applying it. He had never responded to her warnings, never acknowledged her words at all, but she continued to speak to him anyway. It felt wrong to treat him like he was not human, or, rather, not a being worthy of basic courtesy. His only reaction when she spread the salve across the raw flesh was a slight tension in his muscles, a barely perceptible tightening of his jaw. Alara worked quickly and efficiently, her small hands gentle but thorough. She had always been good at this, at healing. It was the one thing she could do that had any value, even if that value was barely recognized. When she finished with his side, she moved to check the gash on his shoulder, the one that had worried her most. It had been deep, dangerously close to important blood vessels, and infection was always a risk in these conditions. But her remedies seemed to be working. The wound was closing, the flesh knitting together with the accelerated healing all werewolves possessed when properly treated. "You are lucky to be alive," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "Whatever fight you were in, it must have been savage." This time, he did react. His head tilted slightly, as if her words had surprised him. Alara felt a strange flutter in her chest at that small movement, at this first real acknowledgement of her presence. She should not feel anything for this man. He was the enemy. He had probably killed members of her pack. But there was something about him, something that drew her in despite every rational thought screaming at her to maintain distance. She told herself it was simply her healer's instinct, her inability to see a suffering creature without wanting to help. She told herself the strange pull she felt whenever she entered his cell was nothing more than curiosity about the man behind the mask. She told herself many lies in those 3 days. The truth, the real truth that she did not yet recognize, hummed between them like a living thing, patient and inevitable. Alara gathered her supplies, preparing to leave as she did every evening when her duties were complete. "I will return tomorrow," she said, as she always did. And then, on impulse, she added something she had never said before. "Is there anything you need? Anything I can bring you?" The silence stretched between them, and Alara felt foolish for asking. He was a prisoner. He was chained to a wall. What could she possibly bring him that would matter? But just as she turned to go, she heard it. A voice. His voice. Deep and rough from days of disuse, with an accent she could not quite place. "Water," he said simply. "Cold water. Please." Alara's heart stuttered in her chest, back to find him still watching her, and something in his gaze made her skin prickle with awareness. "Tomorrow," she promised. "I will bring you cold water tomorrow." She climbed the narrow stone stairs out of the dungeon, her mind replaying the sound of his voice over and over. It should not have affected her so deeply. One simple word. But it had. It did. That night, Alara lay in her small room in the servants' quarters and tried to understand the restlessness that had taken up residence in her chest. She had lived her entire 23 years in the Blackwood Pack territory, had accepted her place at the bottom of the hierarchy with as much grace as she could muster. She had no family, no one who claimed her. Her mother had died in childbirth, and her father had been killed in a border skirmish when she was too young to remember his face. She had been raised by the pack, which was another way of saying she had raised herself, surviving on scraps of attention and charity. Being an Omega meant being invisible, powerless, forgettable. It meant being the last to eat, the last to be considered, the first to be blamed when anything went wrong. It meant accepting that she would never have a mate, never have a family of her own, never be anything more than what she was now. The pack's healer of last resort, barely tolerated, easily replaced. She had made her peace with this reality years ago. So why did the thought of returning to that cell tomorrow make her pulse quicken? Why? Did the memory of dark eyes watching her through a metal mask chase away sleep until the early hours of morning? She did not have answers. Not yet. But she would. Soon. Far sooner than she could have ever imagined. The next morning arrived with gray skies and the promise of rain. Alara performed her usual duties with mechanical efficiency, treating minor injuries and preparing medicines for the pack's appointed healers to distribute. No one spoke to her unless necessary. No one acknowledged her presence unless they needed something from her hands. She had become very good at being invisible. At mid-morning, she gathered fresh bandages, prepared new batches of salve, and filled a clay pitcher with cold water from the well. The weight of it in her hands felt significant somehow, though she could not explain why. As she descended the dungeon stairs, she became aware of voices echoing up from below. Angry voices. Her steps slowed as she recognized one of them as belonging to Alpha Darius. Himself. "I do not care if he dies from it," Darius was snarling. "I want answers. Who sent you? How many more are coming? What were you looking for in our territory?" Silence. Then the sound of flesh striking flesh, hard and brutal. Alara's stomach clenched. She should turn back. She should wait until the Alpha was finished with his interrogation. But her feet carried her forward, drawn by an urgency she did not understand. She rounded the corner to find Alpha Darius standing before the prisoner's cell, his second in command, Beta Thomas, beside him. The prisoner was still chained, still masked, but fresh blood dripped from his mouth where Darius had clearly struck him. Still silent? Darius mocked. How noble, how utterly pointless. He drew back his fist for another blow. Alpha. Alara's voice was small, but clear in the stone chamber. Both men turned to look at her with expressions of surprise and irritation. "I need to treat his wounds," she continued, forcing her voice to remain steady despite the way her hands trembled around the water pitcher. "If you want him alive to answer questions, I need to treat his wounds." Darius's eyes narrowed. For a moment, Ilara thought he might strike her instead, might punish her for daring to interrupt him. But then he laughed, a sharp bark of sound without humor. "Fine. Waste your time on him, Omega. But when we are done questioning him tomorrow, your services will no longer be needed. We will execute him at dawn the following day." He brushed past her, Thomas following, and Ilara was left alone with the prisoner once more. She set down the pitcher with shaking hands and fumbled for her keys to unlock the cell door. Inside, she could see the prisoner's chest rising and falling with controlled breaths, could see the tension in every line of his body. "I brought you cold water," she said softly, kneeling beside him with a clean cloth. "As I promised." She dabbed at the blood on his mouth, her touch feather light. His lip had split where Darius had hit him, and she knew it must hurt despite his stoic silence. "Why did you not answer him?" she asked. "He will kill you if you do not give him something." The prisoner's gaze fixed on her face, intense and unwavering. "Would you have me lie?" he asked. His voice was stronger today, clearer, and Ilara felt that strange pull again, that inexplicable draw toward this man she should fear and hate. "I would have you live," she whispered. Something shifted in the air. Between them, something fundamental and terrifying and inevitable. "Why?" he asked. "You do not know me. You do not know what I have done, who I am, what I am capable of. Why do you care if I live or die?" Ilara could not answer. She did not know how to put into words the feeling that had been growing in her chest since the first moment she had entered his cell. That sense of recognition, of connection, of something profound waiting just beneath the surface of consciousness. Instead, she reached for the water pitcher and held it to his lips. "Drink," she commanded gently. He drank, his eyes never leaving hers, and Ilara felt the world tilt on its axis in a way she did not yet understand. When he had drunk his fill, she set the pitcher aside and continued tending to his injuries. New bruises were forming on his ribs, dark purple blooms of pain across sun-bronzed skin. She traced them with careful fingers, cataloging the damage, planning her treatment. Beneath her hands, she felt him shudder, a full-body tremor that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than physical pain. "You should not touch me like that," he said, his voice rough. "Why not?" Ilara asked, confused. "I am a healer. This is what I do." "Because," he said, and there was something raw in his tone now, something almost desperate. "Every time you touch me, it becomes harder to remember why I should not reach for you in return." Ilara's hand stilled, her breath caught. "You are chained," she said stupidly. He made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Yes, I am. But chains can be broken, little healer. And when they are, when I am free of these bonds, I do not know if I will have the strength to let you go." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning Ilara could not quite grasp. She should be afraid. She should run. Instead, she asked, "Who are you?" "Really?" The prisoner was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, deliberately, he raised his chained hands as much as the restraints would allow. His fingers, long and strong despite the days of captivity, reached for the edge of his mask. "Do you truly want to know?" he asked. "Are you certain? Because once you see, once you know, there will be no going back. For either of us." Ilara's heart thundered in her chest. Every instinct screamed warning, screamed danger, screamed run. But a deeper instinct, one she had not known she possessed, whispered yes. Whispered finally. Whispered home. "Show me," she breathed. If you are enjoying this, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. His fingers gripped the mask, The metal scraped against stone as he lifted it, revealing his face inch by agonizing inch. First his forehead, marked with old scars that spoke of battles long past. Then his eyes, and Alara gasped because they were silver, pure molten silver, the eyes of an alpha wolf in human form. Eyes she had seen before, not in person, but in drawings, in wanted posters, in the fearful whispers of pack members who spoke of the terror from the north. And then the mask fell away completely, clattering to the floor, and Alara found herself staring into the face of Cale Thorne, the Alpha King, the Savage King of the Northern Territories, the man whose armies had crushed 3 major packs in the last 5 years, the man whose name was synonymous with death and destruction, the man who, according to every story she had ever heard, had no mercy, no conscience, no heart. The man who was looking at her now with an expression of such desperate longing that it stole the breath from her lungs. "You," Alara whispered. "You are—" "I am Cale Thorne," he confirmed, "Alpha King of the Northern Realm, and you, little healer, are my mate." The word hit her like a physical blow. Mate. No. Impossible. She scrambled backward, her mind refusing to process what he was saying. "No," she said aloud. "No, that cannot be true. You are the enemy. You are a monster, killed thousands. You cannot be—" But even as she denied it, she felt it. The bond, snapping into place with the force of a thunderclap, a golden thread suddenly visible where before there had been only shadows. It wrapped around her heart, around her soul, pulling her toward him with a strength that terrified her. "I have known since the moment you first walked into this cell," Kyle said. His voice was steady now, certain, despite the chains that bound him. "I scented you before I saw you. Lavender and rain and something uniquely yours. My wolf knew immediately what you were to me, who you were to me." Alara shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Why did you not say anything? Why did you let me—" "Because I wanted you to see me first," he interrupted gently. "Not the mask, not the reputation, not the Alpha King. I wanted you to see the man beneath all of that, before the bond complicated everything. The bond complicates everything anyway," Alara said bitterly. "You are my enemy. My pack will execute you in 2 days. How can we possibly—" She could not finish, could not voice the impossibility of their situation. Cale's expression softened, and despite everything, despite the horror of the revelation and the chaos of her emotions, Alara saw kindness in his eyes, saw understanding. "I did not come here to make war on your pack," he said quietly. "I came searching for something that was stolen from my territory. A sacred artifact. An ancient stone that holds great power. My scouts tracked it to these lands, to someone within the Blackwood pack. I came in secret, with only a small team, hoping to retrieve it without bloodshed. We were discovered. My men were killed. I was captured." He paused, his silver eyes searching her face. "But I found something far more valuable than any stone. I found you." Alara wanted to resist the pull of his words, the sincerity in his voice. She wanted to remember all the stories of his brutality, his ruthlessness. But those stories felt distant now, unreal, when confronted with the man before her. The man who had endured beatings without complaint. The man who had thanked her for water. The man who looked at her like she was precious, like she mattered, like she was something more than the invisible Omega everyone else saw. "What do we do?" she whispered. It was an admission, an acceptance, an acknowledgement that there was a we now, whether she wanted it or not. "You break these chains," Kyle said simply, "and we run, together, before they execute me. Before your Alpha discovers what you are to me and uses you as a weapon against me, or worse, against your own heart." "I cannot," Alara protested. "I do not have the key to your chains. Only Alpha Darius and Beta Thomas have access to them. And even if I could free you, where would we go? Your pack is hundreds of miles north. We would be hunted. We would be together. Kyle finished. We would be alive. We would have a chance. That is more than we will have if you leave me here to die. The truth of his words settled over Alara like a heavy cloak. If she did nothing, Cale would be executed. The mate bond would destroy her, drive her mad with the loss. If she helped him escape, she would be branded a traitor, hunted by her own pack, her life forfeit. Both paths led to suffering, but only one led to possibility. I need time, she said finally. I need to think. You need to feel. Cale interrupted. Stop thinking, little healer. Stop trying to logic your way through something that exists beyond logic. What does your wolf say? What does your heart tell you? Alara closed her eyes. Her wolf, usually so quiet and subdued, was howling inside her. Howling for him. For her mate. For the bond that sang between them like a symphony. And her heart, her treacherous, foolish heart, was already lost. 2 days, she said, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. You said they will execute you in 2 days. That gives me time to find a way, to get the key, to plan an escape route. It gives them time to hurt me further, Cale pointed out. Time to potentially discover who I truly am if they have not already. Time for things to go wrong in 1,000 different ways. Then we will have to make sure they do not, Alara said, with a determination she did not know she possessed. For the first time since the mask had fallen, Cale smiled. It transformed his face, softening the harsh lines, lighting up those extraordinary silver eyes. There she is, he murmured. There is the strength I saw in you from the beginning, the strength you do not even know you have. Alara felt heat rise in her cheeks. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever seen strength in her. I am just an Omega, she said quietly. I am nothing special. You are my mate, Cale said fiercely. You are everything. And if you give me the chance, I will spend the rest of my life proving that to you. The promise hung in the air between them, solemn and sacred. Alara wanted to believe it, wanted to believe in the impossible fairy tale of a powerful Alpha King and an invisible Omega healer finding love in the darkest of circumstances. But wanting and having were two very different things. I should go, she said reluctantly. I have been here too long already. Someone will notice. Before you leave, Cale said urgently, there is something else you need to know. Something about yourself. Alara paused, her hand on the cell door. What do you mean? Your scent, Cale said carefully. It is not just lavender and rain. There is something beneath it. Something old and powerful that has been suppressed or hidden. You are not a simple Omega, Alara. There is royal blood in your veins. I would stake my life on it. The words made no sense. Alara laughed, a brittle sound. Royal blood. I am an orphan. I have no family, no lineage. You are mistaken. But even as she spoke, she remembered things. Strange things. The way her wounds had always healed faster than other Omegas. The way she could sometimes sense illness in others before any symptoms showed. The dreams she had as a child of running through forests she had never seen. Of a woman with silver eyes who called her princess. Dreams she had dismissed as fantasy. I am not mistaken, Cale said with absolute certainty. And if I am right, if you truly are who I think you might be, then you are in as much danger here as I am. Perhaps more. Who? Alara demanded. Who do you think I am? Kyle's expression was grave. 24 years ago, the Moonstone Pack was destroyed in a massacre. The royal family was slaughtered, their territory absorbed by surrounding packs including the Blackwoods. But there were always rumors that one child survived. An infant daughter, spirited away in the chaos. A princess of the Moonstone bloodline, lost and hidden, waiting to reclaim her birthright. Alara's vision swam. 24 years ago. The age. Her mother supposedly died giving birth to her. An orphan with no past, no history. No, she whispered. That is impossible. Is it? Cale challenged. Or is it the truth you have been running from your whole life? The truth someone has been hiding from you? Before Alara could respond, footsteps echoed on the stairs. She jerked back from the cell, her heart pounding. Tomorrow, she hissed at Cale. We will talk more tomorrow. She slammed the cell door shut and whirled around just as Bitawa. Thomas appeared. Still wasting your time on the prisoner? He sneered. He will be dead soon enough. Then you will have one less person to worry about feeding, Alara replied, keeping her voice meek and submissive as she gathered her supplies. Thomas grunted and moved past her to peer into the cell. Alara held her breath, praying he would not notice the mask lying on the floor, would not recognize the face of the man chained to the wall. But Thomas barely glanced at Cale before turning away, apparently satisfied that the prisoner was still secure. Get out of here, Omega, he ordered. You stink of healing herbs and weakness. Alara did not need to be told twice. She fled up the stairs, her mind reeling with everything Cale had told her. Mate bond, royal bloodline, impossible truths and dangerous secrets. That night, she dreamed of silver wolves running beneath a full moon, dreamed of a palace made of white stone, of gardens filled with moonflowers, of a woman who looked like an older version of herself wearing a crown of stars, dreamed of fire and blood and screaming, of a man she somehow knew was her father falling beneath a rain of claws and teeth, dreamed of gentle hands lifting an infant from a burning cradle, of whispered promises and desperate flight through dark forests. She woke gasping, tears streaming down her face, her wolf howling inside her with a grief that felt ancient and fresh all at once. The dreams were not fantasy. They were memory. Buried. Deep. Suppressed somehow. But real. Cale was right. She was not who she thought she was. And if he was right about that, what else might he be right about? The next day passed in a blur of fear and planning. Alara moved through her duties mechanically, her mind focused on the problem of how to free Cale without being caught. The keys to his chains were kept in Alpha Darius's private study, a room she had no legitimate reason to enter. But she had to try. She had to find a way. As evening fell, and the pack gathered for dinner in the Great Hall, Alara saw her opportunity. The Alpha and Beta were both present, occupied with their meal and conversation. The study would be empty. She slipped away from the kitchens where she had been helping prepare food, her heart hammering against her ribs. The corridors of the pack house were dimly lit, shadows pooling in corners. She moved quickly, quietly, using every skill she had learned from years of making herself invisible. The study door was locked, but Alara had expected that. What she had not expected was to find it warded with magic, a faint shimmer of energy visible to those who knew how to look. She reached out tentatively, her fingers brushing the ward, and gasped as it parted for her like water, like it recognized her, like it knew she had a right to pass. Inside the study, Alara moved to the desk where she knew Darius kept important items. She rifled through drawers, searching desperately for the keys. Minutes ticked by. 2. Many minutes. She was running out of time. And then she found them. 2 iron keys on a simple ring, tucked into a locked drawer that opened when she touched it. The magic lock yielding to her as the ward had done. Alara stared at the keys in her trembling hand, understanding flooding through her. Magic recognized magic. Blood recognized blood. She truly was who Cale believed her to be. A princess of the Moonstone line, gifted with the royal magic that had been her birthright. A birthright. Someone had gone to great lengths to suppress and hide. She pocketed the keys and turned to leave, only to freeze as she heard voices in the hallway. Alpha Darius and Beta Thomas, returning earlier than expected. There was no other exit from the study. No window, no back door. She was trapped. Panic clawed at her throat as the footsteps grew closer. She looked around desperately for somewhere to hide, but the study was sparsely furnished. They would find her. They would know what she had done. And then the door opened. What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below. Alara pressed herself against the wall behind the door, making herself as small as possible, praying to any deity that might listen that they would not notice her. The execution is set for dawn, Darius was saying as he entered. I want it public. I want the entire pack to see what happens to those who trespass on our territory. What if he talks before then? Thomas asked. What if he reveals something useful? He will not, Darius said with absolute certainty. I have been breaking men for longer than you have been alive, Thomas. That one would die before betraying his secrets. Admirable in a way. Foolish, but admirable. They moved deeper into the study, their backs to Alara. This was her chance. She slipped out from behind the door and into the hallway, moving as silently as a ghost. She did not breathe until she was 3 corridors away, her back pressed against cold. Stone. The keys burning like hot coals in her pocket. She had them. She actually had them. Now she just needed to reach Cale, free him, and escape before dawn. Simple. Impossible. Necessary. She waited until the pack house settled into sleep before making her move. The dungeon stairs had never seemed so long, so treacherous. Every shadow seemed to hide watching eyes. Every sound made her flinch. But she made it to the bottom undetected. Made it to Cale's cell. He was awake. Waiting. Of course he was. He had probably been awake since she left yesterday, planning, preparing. I have the keys, she whispered, holding them up so he could see. Relief and something fiercer, something possessive and proud, flashed across Cale's face. My brilliant mate, he murmured. I knew you could do it. Alara unlocked the cell door and rushed to him, her hands shaking as she fitted the first key into the lock on his wrist shackles. The metal clicked open, and Cale's hand dropped free. She moved to the second shackle, acutely aware of how close they were, how his scent wrapped around her like smoke. Pine and winter air and something wild that called to her wolf. The second shackle opened, then the ones on his ankles. Kyle stood slowly, rolling his shoulders, stretching muscles that had been confined for days. Even wounded, even weakened from his captivity, he was magnificent, tall and broad, and radiating the kind of power that made the air shimmer. We need to go, Alara said urgently. Need to move before anyone realizes. Cale's hand cupped her cheek, silencing her. His touch was gentle, reverent, and Alara felt the mate bond flare between them like lightning. Thank you, he said simply, for believing in me, for saving me, for choosing me. I have not chosen anything yet, Alara protested weakly. I am just making sure you do not die in this cell. Liar, Cale said, but his tone was affectionate. You chose me the moment you decided to steal those keys. You chose us. And I swear to you, Alara, you will never regret it. He leaned down, and for one breathless moment, Alara thought he might kiss her. Wanted him to kiss her. Needed it with an intensity that frightened her. But Cale pulled back at the last second, his silver eyes dark with restrained hunger. Not here, he said roughly. Not in this place. When I claim you, when I finally taste those lips, it will be somewhere worthy of you. Somewhere safe. The promise in his words made Alara's knees weak, but there was no time to dwell on it. No time for anything except escape. They moved through the dungeon, Kyle silent as a shadow despite his size. Alara led the way, her knowledge of the pack house guiding them through servant passages and forgotten corridors. They were almost to the eastern exit, almost to freedom, when they heard the alarm bells begin to ring. Someone had discovered the empty cell. Someone had raised the alert. Run, Cale commanded, grabbing Alara's hand. They ran. Through. Corridors, downstairs, bursting out into the cold night air. Behind them, shouts erupted. Torches flared to life. The hunt had begun. The forest loomed ahead, dark and deep. If they could reach it, if they could lose themselves in the trees, they might have a chance. Kyle pulled Alara along, his longer legs eating up the distance. She could feel his strength returning with every step, could sense his wolf surging to the surface. They were 50 feet from the tree line when wolves exploded from the pack house behind them. Massive beasts, snarling and savage, led by a black wolf Alara recognized as Alpha Darius himself. "Keep running," Kale ordered. "No matter what happens, do not stop." "I will not leave you," Alara gasped out. Kale's laugh was wild, fierce, exultant. "Who said anything about leaving?" And then he was changing, his human form rippling, reshaping, expanding into the largest wolf Alara had ever seen. Silver fur, eyes like molten mercury, radiating power that made the Earth itself seem to tremble, an Alpha King in his true form. Magnificent. Terrifying. Hers. Kale turned to face the pursuing pack, placing himself between them and Alara. He let out a howl that shook the night sky, a sound of challenge and dominance that froze every wolf in their tracks. All except Alpha Darius, who continued his charge, massive jaws open, ready to tear and rend. The two alphas collided with the force of thunder, fur and claws and teeth, a whirlwind of violence and primal fury. Alara watched in horror as they fought, as blood stained the ground, as the other pack wolves began to circle, waiting for their chance to join the fray. She had to do something, had to help. But what could she do? She was an Omega, powerless, weak. Except she was not. She had never been. The truth Kale had spoken, the dreams she had remembered, the way the wards and locks had yielded to her touch. All of it pointed to the same impossible reality. She was a princess of the Moonstone bloodline. And it was time to stop hiding. Alara closed her eyes and reached deep inside herself, past the walls of suppression that had been built around her power, past the years of being told she was nothing. She reached for the magic in her blood, the birthright that had been stolen from her. And it answered. Oh, how it answered. Power erupted from Alara's core, silver light blazing from her skin, her eyes, her very soul. The wolves surrounding her stumbled back, whimpering, unable to withstand the pressure of her unleashed aura. Even Darius broke away from Kale, his dark eyes wide with shock and recognition. "Impossible," he snarled, his wolf's voice rough and guttural. "You cannot be. The Moonstone heir is dead. I made sure of it myself." The admission hung in the air, a confession and a condemnation. Alara felt fury replace her fear, felt her wolf surge forward stronger than it had ever been. "You killed them," she said, her voice resonating with power. "You killed my family. You destroyed my pack. And you have been hiding me here all these years, suppressing my power, using me as a servant while you profited from my family's stolen territory." Darius's laugh was cruel. "Your father was weak. Your mother was weak. The Moonstone pack was weak. I did what had to be done to strengthen our kind. And I kept you alive because your blood, diluted as I made it, still had power. Power I could use." He bared his teeth in a savage grin. "But I see I did not dilute it enough. No. Matter, I will finish what I started all those years ago." He lunged for Alara, jaws wide. But Kale was faster. The silver wolf intercepted Darius mid-leap, slamming into him with brutal force. They went down in a tangle of fur and fury, but this time Kale had the advantage. This time, he was not weakened by chains and starvation. This time, he was protecting his mate. The fight was savage and short. When it ended, Alpha Darius lay still, his throat torn out, his reign of terror finally over. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. The other pack wolves stood frozen, uncertain. Their alpha was dead. The Omega they had ignored and dismissed was blazing with royal power, and an Alpha King stood between them and their target, clearly willing to kill anyone who threatened what was his. Beta Thomas stepped forward, his wolf form bristling. "Stand down," Alara commanded, and her voice rang with authority she had never known she possessed. "Darius is dead. His crimes have been paid for. Any who wish to challenge me for the right to lead the Moonstone territory may do so. Any who wish to join me in rebuilding what was destroyed may stay. The rest may leave and find refuge in other packs. But this ends tonight. The lies, the suppression, the cruelty, all of it ends now." Thomas shifted back to human form, his expression stunned. "The Moonstone territory belongs to the Blackwoods," he said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "It has for over 20 years. It was stolen," Alara corrected. "But I am not interested in revenge or further bloodshed. I am interested in justice, in healing what has been broken. Those who were loyal to my family, those who have suffered under Darius's rule, they deserve better. I will give them better." She looked at the gathered wolves, at faces she had known her entire life. Some looked shocked. Some looked afraid. But some, she saw with a flutter of hope, looked relieved, even grateful. "I am Alara Moonstone," she declared, "daughter of Alpha Julian and Luna Celeste, rightful heir to the Moonstone Pack, and I am claiming my birthright." The power in her words resonated through the air, and one by one, wolves began to bow. Not all of them. Not Thomas and a handful of others who had profited too much from Darius's regime. They fled into the night, and Alara let them go. Enough blood had been shed. Enough lives had been destroyed. When the last of them had gone, when only those who had chosen to stay remained, Alara felt the power ebb away, leaving her trembling and exhausted. She would have fallen if Kyle had not caught her, his human arms strong and sure around her waist. "Easy," he murmured against her hair. "I have you. I always have you." Alara leaned into him, letting herself be weak for just a moment. Let herself be held. "What happens now?" she whispered. Kale pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "Now we build. You rebuild your pack. I help. In any way I can. And when you are ready, when everything has settled, you come north with me. Not as a conquest, not as a prize, but as my equal, my mate, my queen. And if I want to stay here?" Alara asked, though her heart already knew the answer. "Then I stay with you," Kale said simply. "Wherever you go, that is where I belong. That is what mate bonds mean. That is what love means. Love." The word hung between them, precious and terrifying. "You do not know me well enough to love me," Alara protested. Kyle smiled, that devastating smile that transformed his harsh features into something beautiful. "I have known you in all the ways that matter. I have seen your compassion when you tended my wounds, your courage when you defied your alpha to protect me, your strength when you embraced your power, your wisdom when you chose mercy over vengeance. I have seen your heart, Alara. And yes, I love you. Completely. Eternally." Tears spilled down Alara's cheeks. Tears of joy and relief. An overwhelming emotion. "I do not know how to be a princess," she confessed. "I do not know how to lead a pack. I do not know how to be your queen." "You will learn," Kale assured her. "I will teach you everything I know. And what I cannot teach, you will discover on your own. You are stronger than you realize, braver than you believe. You always have been." He lowered his head, his lips hovering just above hers. "May I kiss you now?" he asked softly. "Please," Alara breathed. The kiss was gentle at first, reverent, a soft press of lips that sent sparks racing through Alara's entire body. But it quickly deepened, became more urgent, more necessary. Kale's hands tangled in her hair. Alara's fingers dug into his shoulders. The mate bond sang between them, golden and perfect, finally acknowledged and claimed. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alara rested her forehead against Kyle's chest and laughed. Laughed with the pure, unfettered joy of someone who had been lost and was finally found. "I was supposed to be invisible," she said. "I was supposed to be nothing. You were always meant to be everything," Kale corrected. "You just needed to remember." In the days that followed, Alara began the work of rebuilding. She discovered that many in the Blackwood Pack had secretly been loyal to the Moonstone line, had been waiting all these years for someone to challenge Darius's rule. They came forward now, offering their support, their knowledge, their strength. Together, they began to restore the old Moonstone territory. They cleared the ruins of the palace, began construction on new buildings. They established trade with neighboring packs, including Kale's northern kingdom. They created laws that protected the vulnerable and punished the cruel. Kale stayed through it all, true to his word. He advised when asked, supported when needed, but never took over. This was Alara's pack, her responsibility, her triumph. He was simply there to stand beside her, to love her, to remind her of her worth when the doubts crept in. 3 months after that fateful night, the Moonstone Pack officially reformed. A ceremony was held, witnessed by representatives from packs across the continent. Alara stood before her people, wearing a crown that had been saved from the destruction all those years ago, and accepted the mantle of Alpha. Luna Alpha, they called her. A female Alpha, rare but not unheard of, especially in bloodlines as old and powerful as the Moonstones. And beside her stood Kale Thorn, Alpha King of the North, her mate and partner in all things. The ceremony concluded with the traditional claiming ritual, where Kale marked Alara before the assembled witnesses, his bite gentle but permanent on the curve of her throat. And Alara marked him in return, claiming the Savage King as thoroughly as he claimed her. That night, in the newly completed private chambers of the palace, Kale and Alara finally consummated their bond completely. There was tenderness and passion, laughter and tears, the kind of profound intimacy that comes from two souls recognizing each other as home. Afterward, lying in the tangle of silk sheets with Kale's arms around her, Alara thought about the journey that had brought her here. From invisible Omega to Luna Alpha. From powerless to powerful. From alone to cherished. "Do you regret it?" Kale asked softly, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "Regret what?" "Saving me. Choosing this path. Everything that came after." Alara turned in his arms to look up at him, at the face she had come to love more than she thought possible. "I regret nothing," she said fiercely. "You helped me find myself. Find my power. Find my purpose. How could I regret that? Even though it was hard? Even though it hurt? Especially because it was hard," Alara said. "Because anything worth having is worth fighting for. And you, Kale Thorn, are worth fighting for. We are worth fighting for." Kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I love you," he murmured between kisses. "My healer, my princess, my queen, my everything." "I love you too," Alara replied. "My king, my mate, my home." Outside their window, the full moon rose over the Moonstone territory, bathing everything in silver light. And somewhere in the distance, wolves howled in celebration, in unity, in joy. The invisible Omega and the masked prisoner had become so much more than either had dreamed possible. They had become legends. They had become leaders. But most importantly, they had become exactly what they were always meant to be. Two halves of one whole, perfectly matched, eternally bonded, forever loved. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who loves epic romance. Tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming?